I think the idea is that you have to think about your twin as there's certainly the face and the voice, but the real thing is, what do you want to do with it? And I think that's the thing with AI in general is there's all these really cool things, but you have to think from a product standpoint, what actually does somebody want to pay to do? And I think that's where we're in this shift right now, where there's all these new possibilities, but if you're selling this to the world, they range into how sophisticated the customers are. They're it's changing very quickly. I assume all of you mostly use Gemini or ChatGPT. What would you say the mix is of people?
Yeah, ChatGPT and like Perplexity.
Okay, all right. So one of the things with ChatGPT that's changed relatively recently, and I think this is an important thing to think about if you're doing anything with AI, is that you've been using these large language models where you ask a question, you get an answer. It's incredible. You can paste a lot of context in. You can say rewrite this, analyze it, whatever. But now, as of the last few weeks, ChatGPT has been integrating dozens of applications from third parties. So now, for example, Slack, you probably don't use Slack, right?
Yeah, I think the work people use it, like people
Yeah.
who work in jobs. Yeah.
So like, everybody mostly in businesses use Slack. So all the conversations we have all day long are usually in Slack. And we have it so you can sync all your Slack messages to your twin. So I was talking to the twin of one of my employees, and I was like, "How is this other developer doing today?" And he said, "Oh, he's kind of stressed today," because it knew from the transcripts that had been going on with the company, they knew he was stressed about something. And so when I had the conversation, it was up to date in terms of understanding that. Well, with ChatGPT, when you connect all these apps, so for example, let's say you have a report you need to do. You know how you can use ChatGPT to go out and search and come back with your results. Well, I'd written all these documents and I had all these conversations I had with people on calls, and they all got. I just said, go through all my Google Docs on anything about this topic from the last 60 days, go through all my Slack conversations, pull them all together, create this report based on that. And it would just take a ridiculous amount of time to do that. And but it's not just copying this, it's understanding it. It's understanding all the things I've been doing. And then the memory of ChatGPT is just learning more about you. So I would say if you're doing anything with developing applications, the future that just started a few weeks ago is this integration. Like like it's such a big deal.
That's really interesting. So, is your AI application used more for like work related things? Like I saw that your Mebot, like because that's what your website is called, Mebot.
Yeah.
Um, your chatbot was like asking me about how it could help me in work related aspects. So, would you say that it only helps with work, or could it also have like conversations with people?
Oh, sure. I mean, it can really do anything that you want it to. I mean, it could be your friend, but we're focusing from a, and I guess this is actually a good thing to think about if you're developing products is that you can develop almost exactly the same technology, but target a different market with it. So, for example, that technology that we have that we've put together is great for work. It's great for, it could be a companion. It could be a relative that's passed away that you bring back to life or preserve. Obviously, I hear there's pornography in this world that, obviously that's something that these things to be used for. We don't do any of these things except for focus on the version of you that needs to be presented out in the world to do things that has to be you. So, for example, we're on a call right now. If it was somebody else, if I just said, here's all the things you should talk about, right? I went through all your questions and I said, you know, hey Susan, could you go onto this call for me and answer all these questions? You would be like, that's not what I wanted, right? I mean, but you still want to talk to me right now, but I could, in theory, send my twin that knows all the answers to all those questions, and you could have a conversation. Still probably not right for this, But imagine this is a work conversation and there's the marketing people and the salespeople and finance. And I send myself and I say, go to this meeting. I've got 5 questions you need to figure out during this call, and then answer any questions the rest of the team has. So now they can have a conversation. They can just jump and go, hey, Peter, what's the status of this part of the project? So these are the kind of things that people pay money, they pay a lot of money to solve these problems. Whereas, and and I think that another thing that's kind of important in AI that's going to be coming, it's going to be a huge deal, is identity.
Hmm.
Because right now we have our social media profiles, and people know that to you because it has your picture, but they actually don't really know it's you. I mean, Instagram, TikTok, they've got maybe your phone number, but they actually really don't have. They've never seen your ID. They don't really know that. So we're adding this capability where you go through this verification, because in AI, if you say go to this meeting and be me, you want to know that it's me. So having a verification, knowing that this version the ID has been checked, the verification of the facial features and ID is all there. And you're going to see that with a lot of applications, because in AI you can fake everything. And so being able to be sure of something is just about to become a lot more valuable now that AI is here, because it's making it hard to know what's true.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. So I had a list of questions prepared.
Yes,
So
yes.
I'm just gonna ask a few of those. So um, how does your AI product ensure that each person's chatbot doesn't say things that they wouldn't say in real life? Like, I understand that it reads like Slack messages, but if it says something that
Right.
the person would say, like, how do you ensure that that doesn't happen?
So first of all, I should just say that our product has certain things it's used for today, and a lot of things that we're not launched yet. We're testing, and so I'm going to talk about those as well. They're all kind of, some of them may not be there, some may be. So just keep that in mind, because we're just rolling out this over the coming weeks, this next phase. Um, so first of all, just generally with any kind of AI product, you have guardrails. I don't know if that is a term that you're familiar with, but it's so you what you do is you have you have a conversation with a chatbot, but behind the scenes, whoever has created that chatbot, whether it's ChatGPT or somebody who's integrated it like us, they create some rules that you don't see, which is the system prompts, where it says, I don't care what they say, do not do not go off and do things like make bombs and stuff. Like, like, don't say these kind of things. Like, keep within this kind of behavior. And here's some things you cannot talk about. And then, no matter what you do, it's supposed to keep you, like, every time you type something, that gets sent to the AI. But before it gets wrapped in that system prompt, there's a guardrail that says, do not go off of this path. And then there's another part where, if you get more sophisticated, where you check the response that's coming back, and you
Mhm.
actually then check that again and go, okay, you knew what the rules were, but did you actually follow them? Let me just do a double check. So there's different layers that you can be, we're not doing a ton of that, like, at this point, really, really. Um, but you bring up something that is also really important with AI, is what is the access to information that your AI chatbot has. Now, if you can imagine what I was telling you before with all these apps being integrated into AI, how much information that you want to be sure does not get to the wrong person. So imagine now we've just had this conversation. I actually, it's funny, I didn't actually connect this, but we're adding a feature next month, that if I was on this call, I would have one of those, the note taker apps on the calls, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So, like, that our Mebot one would be on that call, and so everything from this call would then be recorded. I mean, the transcript would go right into my twin. So now all the meetings I ever have, and I do the same thing with a phone device when I'm in an in-person meeting, if they'll let me, it all just goes in there. Now I can ask my own twin anything I want to, and it knows but I can say, tell me what is the what have we determined over the last 30 days or 90 days on the marketing plan, whatever. Um, but I can also use that data and put it into ChatGPT and do some really other cool stuff. But let's say now you want to ask my twin a question about something, and you're like, I met with Peter a week ago. We talked about this. Let me ask him, but ask him what else he knows about this topic. So like you might be like, I forgot to ask him that question. So you go back and say, remind me what you said, but also tell me more about this. And then all the other meetings I've had, I could pull what I know from that. But if I didn't do it correctly, I might share with you private meetings that I shouldn't be sharing with you, right? So that's the kind of very tricky kind of things that I won't say that we've solved completely, but you're going to find this happening all over the place with AI. It's going to be, what are the permissions that AI can then talk about and that you want to share with it?
Cool. So, what would you feel are some misconceptions people have about AI today?
Um, well, I think a lot of people think everything is being trained on what you do with the AI, which in some cases is the case. There's usually settings you can turn it off. But I also think that people, um, I think they think that it's going to, like, they think about solving the problems we have in the world today. We think, oh, here's our world. We can use AI and do this, this, and this better. And so, and then they're worried about the future, how it's going to take jobs away, or it's going to, do these things. And what I think one of the problems is, and this is just for every technology trend, but it's just happening very fast, is we imagine how this technology will fix the problems we have today. They'll do what we need to do better. And then we think the future, what we don't realize sometimes is that the future, those changes will change the world, and then sometimes the outcome is not what we thought. So I'll give you an example. We're having this call right now because you want to ask me questions. But let's say my twin was really, really good. Everybody in that room could have any conversation they want with me. And as great as you are at asking me the questions, they might have completely different set of questions, and they wouldn't have to do this interview. It would be maybe better. I mean, right now I'm better. but you see, like, so we think like, oh, I can send it to a meeting on Zoom, and then you'd be like, well, I can send mine to a meeting on Zoom, and then think, well, what's the point of that? You should just be talking through an API and not even having a conversation. And so that's where we solve a problem today, like being on a call. But if everybody starts to use it, then you realize the problem just changes. And now I say, I want my twin to talk to your twin, work out what we want, and we both see the results. But then it might eventually be that I don't want to read what we talked about. I don't want to read what our twins talked about. I just want to know that it's there, so that sometime when I have a question, I know it knows all that. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's like I live in this weird world of all this AI stuff, and some of it may not. So you feel free to ask for clarification if something I say doesn't make any sense.
Okay, yeah, I think I kind of understood what you were saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what challenges did you face in creating your application, and how did you overcome those challenges?
So I was lucky enough I've started a number of companies and I've sold some companies. I was lucky enough to fund this myself. We're going to go raise some money soon, but I actually started it 4 years ago. And 4 years ago, there wasn't even ChatGPT like 3.5 out. It didn't work very well. It was, I think it might have been 3 or 2.5 or something. And so very quickly we decided this is ridiculous. This isn't going to work. The voice stuff was very slow and it didn't work very well, and the cloning didn't work, and the time it took for somebody to ask a question and get a response was so slow and so unpredictable that it didn't seem real. And so we just were like, this is crazy. So then we kind of dabbled with some stuff, and we thought it was getting closer, and and so we were so early that was very challenging. So then you just spend money while you're waiting. And it didn't really matter what we did. The technology for voice and video, other companies had to develop that, and ChatGPT and everybody, that had to get better. So sometimes you have to be thinking here's the idea, but ask, is the technology all there yet to do what you want to do? Because you can't do it all yourself. And then also, what is the world ready for? So, for example, this idea of sending a twin to a meeting or being on this call. A year ago, if we talked to somebody about that, they would say, that's crazy. I don't want anything to do with it. It's the devil. Forget it. Then about 6 months ago, people were like, yeah, I guess I could see that. Now they're like, could you do this? Could you do this? Everybody has an idea for use it. Like people want to use it to interview people, interview at 100 candidates. So eventually what happens is society starts to catch up and then they start to, so I think that's the biggest challenge is when's the technology ready and when is society ready to understand that you can do things differently? And it's those two things sometimes you cannot control.
Yeah, definitely. So what would you, I mean, did you work in the AI field prior to the creation of your company?
No, but I've been in the AI field for 4 years, so that's just like makes me like ancient in AI, you know, the LLM world at least. Before that, I was working in tech for about 35 years total. But ever since I was in like junior high school, I was interested in computers and tech, and I used to write a little code back when I was, even younger than you. But I never was an engineer. I actually had a different life I was in. I was a DJ, and then I started a record label. I opened some dance clubs. All this was in my 20s, and then later I just got into tech, and I think so. Your question about uh, because you asked me a question, but the thing is what you want to do with that answer. And, you think about like why you asked me that, and I'm gonna ask you that is why did you ask me that? Because I'll share something else with you. But
So honestly, I think it was just for everyone to kind of get to know you and what you did
yeah,
before you went to AI, just as like a kind of icebreaker.
okay.
For-
Well, it's a great question though because a lot of people would think, and the reason I'm asking this is because sometimes people are looking and going, well, do I need to do, what kind of background do I need to do this? And AI is one of these moments that you'll have to just trust me on this one because I'm old enough to have lived through a few of these waves. And the last one was really the internet, really in the 90s, is where the world completely changes. And what happens is at this moment, well, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, just by saying that I am doing this makes you an expert. You can't say that very often. And it only comes in waves about every 30 years, where the world changes on how it's going to work. Like everything starts to change. And the technology, it's not so much what the tech does, it's understanding how it's going to change work and society. And so if you can find those right moments, then you're incredibly valuable to the world. And it almost doesn't matter what you've done before. And it typically when an early technology comes, if you look at the people that really do well, it's often the people who do not come from that background because, so for example, software developers, one of the challenges I have with software developers that work for me is if I say, gee, you should use these AI tools to write code. No, I know you've written stuff. And if you're starting from scratch, you can use AI now to vibe code amazing things. It's different when you're doing a bigger app, but if you've been doing software development for 10 or 20 years, you know how to do it a certain way. And when someone comes along with this new way, you almost don't really want it to be true because it
Yeah.
makes everything you've worked at less valuable. Now, some people find it saves them work, but eventually, the other thing is if you're writing code, there's all these parts of the application, and most developers in the last year or so have been saying, well, I have this little bit of code, so I'm going to use AI to write this little bit of code. And they'll help me. But if you look at somebody who's starting fresh, they'll go, wait a minute, what? I should just, instead of thinking about each little problem, I'm going to think about the big picture, feed it into the AI, and not just write the code, but have it understand the goals. And then you're talking to it, you're telling it to change the goals. And that's how you build software in the future. But most software developers, that's not how they think. To understand the big picture, the business reasons, who are your customers? AI can understand that. Most software developers, to be honest, they don't understand that very well. So you have to have these layers of people interpreting it. So the the people that write the really important stuff in our application are actually not the software developers. They're the people who develop the prompts and the architecture for understanding essentially how language works. And those people, I like to get them that are not software developers, because software developers write the prompts that they just can't do it well, because you have to, if you know more about like philosophy, literature, history, um, you probably can write a better prompt than a software developer for some of the things we're doing, not for everything. Like, I don't know if probably you have no reference point of what I'm saying, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Like, it's a different way of thinking. It's not a precise way of thinking. A, B, C. I'm going to get exactly to this point. AI is like, well, you kind of get here, you kind of get there, and that's just a different way of approaching problems. And the world has just changed. So many people that saw the world one way now have to change their thinking. And this is just an amazing moment for you. But you have to just, just be aware that the world is changing very quickly, and to figure out where the value is that you can add in that world. And it may not be exactly what you think it is. It's by 2 years from now, it could be very different.
Yeah. For sure. I feel like the AI industry is like very fast, quickly changing because there's so many new apps developing and there's so many new technologies being created that you really need to think about like where you can contribute.
Yeah.
Um, so I did have a few more questions, but I don't think I'll be able to ask those because everyone else also wants to ask questions and
Okay.
we have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
I was looking at your website like just earlier, and I saw that when making the AI, your twin, you have to put in and like give it a lot of your info. And I was wondering how you're able to ensure the privacy of your clients.
Yeah. So at this moment, we are purposely not making a lot of claims on the privacy this at this point, because the product is still being developed in a way. That's why there's like a waiting list, and we only let people on very selectively. Eventually, the privacy of their data will be much. Well, first of all, we will not be able to see it, but that is not the case today, and because it's a very immature thing, and a lot of this privacy, there's a lot of companies in that mix of technology, so we have to be very careful what we claim to be. And then a lot of so there's privacy and security. And was your question about privacy, or I forget?
Both.
Okay, so yeah, so there's keeping it private from us, keeping it private from other people, and then there's permissions of sharing and you having control. And I think those are issues that we're still working out. And uh, honestly, like it's such a moving target right now. I don't have a very strong answer for how that's going to work. I just know it's a very difficult situation with that.
Next, how scalable do you think your business is? Because you have to store all this data and then you have to run all these AIs at the same time.
Well, we use Google Cloud, and Google Cloud, just like AWS, Amazon, and Microsoft Azure, they have platforms that just really scale pretty much by themselves. As long as they're happy to take your money, but it will scale almost infinitely. So that is so much easier now than it used to be. So the data part, it can get expensive, but the good thing is the LLM parts keeps getting cheaper. So
All right.
it's pretty easy right now for someone to build an infrastructure that will scale very, very quickly, and you don't have to worry too much about it, but it'll get very expensive.
So first, I was kind of curious, from a user perspective, what is the process of creating a Mebot?
So yeah, so you first fill out a couple of things, just some basic. If once you set up account, you have say your name and a picture you upload. We are adding this verification option you have, which is to go upload your ID, move your head around and some information. Then a third party does a verification, and then we're like, that's you. And then you have to be interviewed with AI. The AI will interview you and ask you a bunch of questions. That takes about 15 minutes. And then it creates this prompt that is your profile. Then, and in that part, you do a voice sample, but then you do this 2-minute video where you speak for a minute about anything you want. You have to smile and do a couple of things, and then you listen for a minute. And during that video is then uploaded, and it takes about 3 hours to process it. And that creates this version that can then be animated by the voice and so forth. So it's a process of capturing this, and then some training is done on GPUs to get the video part and audio part done.